What is the craziest family secret you have? In the 1960s, my grandma had my aunt committed to an asylum because apparently my aunt was kind of a slut when she was young. Is your aunt single? If you want, I'll give you her number. She is 68 years old and smells like decade cigarettes. My one great uncle was probably a spy of some kind. He was a pretty badass dude. Had an exemplary record in WWII. But my parents, evidently, were always suspicious about his job. Supposedly, worked for the US Geological Survey but, among other things, he sure traveled for work a lot for someone who worked for the interior. I'm not aware of the other reasons they had for their suspicions when he was alive, but my dad was a detective, so I figure he knows what he's talking about. Seems their suspicions were valid. After he died, they went through his house belongings. His passport had no stamps despite the fact that he was often overseas. He had secret compartments in his house, including a few for guns, and he was hardly the paranoid type. And some other stuff that I can't remember. No idea what he did for his job, and I don't think we'll ever know. Really cool guy though. Everyone misses him. Edit. Forgot an important detail regarding my folks' suspicions. The feds raided his place after his death and before my parents arrived. They said that they needed some of his work files. So, there's that bit too. When I was 10 years old, my family, 3 sisters, mother and stepfather, and I lived with another family, single mother and 3 young boys, in a shitty apartment over a gas station in Buckduck, Maine. My mom has never been what society would call stable and thrived off of being the victim in any situation just for the attention. Of the 3 boys, one of them was a special needs child who was a hard child to manage. While all of us would go to school or work, my mom would stay home with the special needs child. He was about 3-4 years old. One day I come home from school and there is several ambulances and police officers in front of the gas station. I didn't make anything of it at the time due to the area of town. Until I saw my mom with 4 police officers. I was told to go to a friend's house for the night and I did. Well, come to find out that boy died while in her care. The ruling of death was SIDS, but for a while they suspected my mom of smothering him. This was after all the 80s and police work wasn't as conclusive at the time, but in my gut I know she did it. TL. Doctor, my mother may have killed a special needs toddler. My brother got connected with a guy through his friends to move Palm Pilots that fell off the back of a truck in the peak of their popularity. For a couple years, my brother and 2 of his friends would sell them and make lots and lots of money. It explains where a lot of my nice things came from as a kid. My brother would randomly show up to my house with new hockey jerseys, hockey tickets, a new TV, and he usually showed up in a different car every couple months. My parents knew, but I was too young to know what was going on. 2 years ago he and I got drunk and he told me the details of those years in the early 2000s. Apparently in those years, he made over $500,000 off the stolen product. My sister has no idea we have different fathers. Her birth was a result of one of our mother's many affairs. My dad decided not to tell her so that she could be raised like our own, even though she isn't related to him. Good guy dad. Edit. Guys, my dad really is a great dad, seriously. He's done so much for us both and he means the world to me. My mother is a terrible person and I don't talk to her anymore. We will tell her eventually. It's hard to explain, but she isn't quite mature enough to handle it properly yet. She's at a very delicate stage in life. My grandfather had a heart attack in his 60s while having sex with a 21-year-old hooker, or was Grampy a saggy bald pump? She was just slutty. Old Gramps was Lady Krilla till the end. My aunt and uncle, brother and sister, are both divorced because their ex-spouses cheated with each other. No one ever talks about it. Not so much a secret, but my great-grandmother ran a brothel that my grandmother and my aunts worked at all the way up into the 1980s. It's not really a secret, but no one talks about it much. I actually asked my aunt about it once and expected her to be ashamed or something. But she said they all had a pretty good time doing it and no one was forced into it. She said everyone had lots of money and coke and got to meet famous gentlemen on occasion. Edit. I guess I should have mentioned this in the original post. This all happened on my father's side of the family. I know it's wonderful fun to get to tell someone their mother is a whore and actually mean it. But my mom came along afterwards and is, by all appearances, not a whore. My grandfather got married, had a kid, and got divorced before World War II. He married my grandmother after WWII and they were married for 62 years without her ever knowing he was married before or that she had a stepson. My dad and his siblings eventually found out when my grandparents were almost 90. But they chose to keep it a secret from my grandmother since it would have been extra drama at that point for no reason. My great grandparents had money in a place called Strawberry Farms. Turns out Strawberry Farms was a brothel. My great grandparents left money to me in a trust fund. Money from prostitution decades ago is now paying for me to go to law school. Edit. Sorry I missed all of the questions when I was asleep. I have no idea why it was called Strawberry Farms. They had money tied in all over the place that was completely legal. The Strawberry Farms was something that happened in the first half of the 20th century. Not really a secret but we are not to talk about it. My cousin Becca, 10, told her counselor that her brother, Donald, 17, abused her and raped her. Cops came and tormented my cousin Donald for 10 hours without telling him why or what he was being accused of and coerced a sloppy confession out of him. Fast forward to the middle of the trial and Becca finally tells everyone that she made the whole thing up. Family wanted to do a pelvic on her but the idea was rejected. My cousin Donald is now a RSO in NY. A year later, my grandma and aunt, Becca's mom, are running a daycare under their home. It was one of the best in the city. Grandma left her computer alone to prepare snacks for the kids and Becca gets on the computer and pulls up porn. The next day Becca tells her counselor that grandma watches porn while watching the kids. My grandma and aunt lose their business and their house. Edit. I didn't know that this would catch so much attention. She is 16 now. My other cousin is institutionalized now for some weird biological hoarding thing. My grandma passed years ago and my aunt now works at a retirement home as a CNA. She needs help and I think she has gotten help. I don't live in their state so my updates are few and far between. Wish this wasn't going to get buried. Not my family. But my friend's parents got separated when we were in high school. They get back together. Then they separated again a couple of years after we graduated. Turns out the dad is actually closeted to the outside world. But I guess when it gets to be too much they separate and he goes off for a year just getting butt-railed until he's ready to go back in the closet again for a while. I guess it's been happening for decades. I found out when a friend and I were out having drinks. She told me about this ducked up family she's related to. Turned out to be these people. My mom had an affair with our neighbor, who was my best friend at the time's dad. I found out by figuring out her password to her AOL account. I told my brother. He told my dad. Now everybody knows. But my mom doesn't know that we all know. Edit. This happened in 2002. Not recently. No one in my family uses AOL anymore. Rest assured. My sister is not my sister. She is legally my aunt because my mom let my grandma adopt her. Also I was abused by my sister's boyfriend and no legal action was taken and she claims that my dad, she has a different dad, abused her. And my grandma had 10 kids. One died that no one knew about until after my grandma died. And also after she died the family found out there was another kid that she gave away and never told anyone about but they found the adoption paperwork when clearing out her things and said grandma was a bahoo. 10 kids. 8 baby daddies. Had 2 kids in jail. On my grandfather's deathbed my family found out he has a daughter that is younger than me. I'm older than my aunt. My cousin, 19-20, was about to get married to some dude until she went to the motherland to visit her older sister, 28ish, and niece. She had an affair with the baby daddy. Marriage never went through because he had anger problems. Eventually got past them and reconciled with my older cousin, which set off shockwaves throughout the fam in the motherland. Parents made her tell her fiance, no more marriage. She was grounded for 2 years, literally grounded or kicked into the street and taken out of college for what she did to her family. Mom had a secret abortion that only I know about. My ex had an abortion my family doesn't know about with me. We are still friendly to each while she is pregnant again with the rebounds kid. My uncle is a good guy that had a secret son with a woman he met while him and my aunt almost got divorced. My older brother lost his virginity to my younger cousin when she visited the US on vacation, after we set her up with my friend who had a giant crush on her. Hasn't had any intimate relationship before or since. I'm the only grandchild that knows this. But my grandfather was married to prostitute prior to marrying my grandmother. The two of them had a boy who was killed in a car accident when he was 16, after my grandparents were married. They never talked about him. There are no photos of him. And no one seems to know where he was buried or cremated. He was never talked about. And pretty much simply didn't exist. I can't imagine that, even of my own family, to simply vanish and not be cared about enough to even have your name remembered or where you are buried. It's very sad. A distant aunt of mine sleep with her daughter's husband because my aunt's husband, my uncle, couldn't maintain an erection. This happened a while ago and I never knew this recently until my aunt's daughter's husband passed away. I was blown away because I would go over the aunt's daughter house, technically my cousin, and her husband and my uncle would be chilling having a good time. It's not that crazy of secrets, but it's good to get off my chest. I'm the only one in my family that knows my dad's cheated on my mom 4 years ago. Visual evidence. I've been beaten, bruised up. Everyone thinks our family is fine, when in reality, my mom is senile. My dad is abusive and absolutely insane. My professor even said to me in private one day that my parents raised me well, when in reality it was me raising myself into not becoming the monster that currently resides in my dad's human shell. Edit. The darkest one would be that I did put a gun to my mouth sometime last year. Didn't go through with it, because I remembered I still had people that cared for me. I kinda put it in the back of my brain because I didn't want to remember. Depression is an absolute nightmare. Talk to your friends who do have it. I'm honestly doing much better now. My best friends are on Reddit, and they don't even know this. They honestly saved my life, and I'm eternally grateful. This seems pretty tame compared to all the molestation and murder in this thread. When my dad was in college in the 1970s, my grandpa went up to Alaska to work on building the pipeline. It was good money, and he sent most of it home to my grandma so she could take care of the bills and the kids' tuition. He divorced my grandma and my dad had to drop out of college and join the military. About 10 years later they reconciled and got remarried. Now. But when my grandma was on her deathbed, it was discovered that during those 10 years she had married another guy, and came crawling back to my grandpa when she had no one else to feed her habit. Bingo is a cruel mistress. Not really mine, but when I was in high school, my friend Joe had 3 aunts and an uncle. The 3 aunts decided it would be funny to give a 6-year-old child acid. The 6-year-old being his uncle. But he was psychologically scarred, or became mentally unstable, afterwards. He developed schizophrenia and psychosis, and to this day still resides in a mental hospitals. Ducked up if you ask me. Word is my mafia Sicilian grandfather had 21 indictments brought against him the year I was born. Trafficking, bookmaking, etc. He died when I was 5. Fast forward to when I'm 21 and in the police academy I meet the cop who led the federal raid on him years ago. Lots of responses. Because of my police academy ties I know more than the rest of the grandkids. So all his indictments were dropped very soon after the raid. No time served. He died of a heart attack, they say, on his toilet in 1984. I'm not a cop or criminal. Just a shitty morning show DJ. Spelling. Aussie here. However, one in particular is not talked about in my family. My grandmother was raped by a Nazi soldier when her village was invaded. My father was the result. A cousin of mine is the illegitimate son of a past US president. He was born before his father's presidency. So it's a secret that's been pretty well kept. Funny enough, our family never talks about it. Nor do we ever see Papa Prez.